Thank you. Well, first I want to thank Carnegie Mellon University and in particular Heinz College for the invitation to be here. I'm very grateful for it. The words that I'm going to say are on my behalf, so I'm not representing the company I work for. So I was asked to talk about two topics on this panel. One is what can be done, if anything, to prevent from this kind of financial crisis from happening again. What I can tell you is that this one won't happen again. We'll have others, but not this one. And I'll talk about what can be done, if anything, to prevent it. And can a case be made for additional regulation of financial institutions, which is certainly a topic that has been discussed here in the US, in Europe, and is likely to come up next week here in Pittsburgh. And again, a lot can be done. Something has been done, but excessive regulation can lead to more harm than good. So now I'll talk about 4 points which address these two questions. So the first one is, can bubbles be identified or pricked before they actually become dangerous to the financial system? And if anybody in the audience knows how to do this, please come and look me up after. I'd be extraordinarily grateful. It's easy to prick 10 of the next 2 bubbles. It's very difficult to pick the 2 that are going to happen. And creative destruction can be a good thing. So the short answer there, and we can expand in the Q&A area, is no, it's extraordinarily difficult to do. And a lot of capitalism is based on risk-taking, and it would certainly do more ill than good to stop that. The second related question, of course, is can or should regulators curb risk-taking? And this is and are there consequences on growth and welfare? And this is a very deep question, and I could keep you here for days on end until I put everyone to sleep. But the fact is that although we can curb risk-taking, it would likely lead to less growth and less welfare. And it's interesting, the literature has come up with evidence that if you prevent all cycles from taking place, all boom-bust cycles, you'll likely end up with less growth and less welfare. So although it would be lovely to prevent the crisis, sometimes while preventing the crisis, you can end up preventing growth as well. So the G20 and all regulators have to be particularly careful not to prevent growth from happening. As I was telling my fellow panelists earlier, I went camping this last weekend and I saw these wonderful sequoias, one of which is the great grizzly. It's 280 feet tall. And what I was told is that in the past, when the US government and the National Park Service decided to protect the sequoias, they prevented fires from taking place. And only 25 years ago, they realized that fires play a very important role in the growth of sequoias. The sequoias have, their sap is based in water, not on oil. And thus they do fairly well on the fires, and the other smaller trees end up doing very poorly on fires. So what happens is that fires allow the sequoias to take the resources from the other trees. So in the end, the fires, if controlled, are good for the sequoias. And something similar may be happening to the economy. If we prevent all the risk-taking and we prevent all the failures, we will also prevent many of the good enterprises to succeed and the economies from growing correctly. This does not mean that there should be no regulation. And in particular, there should be regulation when the incentive compatibility is not there, i.e., when the risk-taking and compensation are not related to each other. When individuals or institutions get paid or are getting protection, which is extraordinary, then there should be more regulation. So I'm not saying that there should be none. And in particular in financial institutions, of course, if there's going to be a lender of last resort, well, there ought to be some recognition of that, and there should be regulation for it. And indeed, there has been regulation for a long time. The Basel II agreement has been in place for a long time, and it gives guidelines that different banks and financial institutions should follow in terms of their capitalization and their type of risk that they should be running. This doesn't mean that they always do it, but this is the way it ought to be done. So should this kind of requirements be strengthened? Yes, of course they should be strengthened, but not in a way that curbs growth. So it becomes more an art than a science. The last point is that regulation becomes very tricky when you do it in a global sense. So how exactly do you regulate a German bank that is lending money to mortgages in Stockton, California? If the bank fails, who should be the one bailing out the depositors of that bank? Should it be the US government or the FDIC? Should it be the ECB, the European Central Bank? Should it be the German authorities? It's very complicated when there are cross-border issues. So an optimal response will likely have to be coordinated, which is what fora like the G20 are trying to accomplish. We can talk more about this in the Q&A.
Thanks, Mark.